Hello, friends. Tina here. In a few weeks, we're going to have Eve Lorgen on our YouTube channel. She is the author of The Alien Love Bite and The Dark Side of Cupid. And if any of you have had trouble in relationships, then I highly recommend both of her books. I'm going to read for you a chapter from The Alien Love Bite, Chapter 1. Is the love bite real? So here we go. Never before in the UFO literature has anyone focused so much attention on what appears to be an alien plan to manipulate love relationships. This dark and taboo topic, when fully explored, indicates that the aliens are up to no good. I say this only for those readers who may think all the aliens are here to act as our intellectual and spiritual benefactors. In truth, we do not know. There are far too many negative reports to assume benevolence, or simple curiosity, or angelic visions. Ascribing a positive motive to their action is like hoping King Arthur will come down from a cloud and whisk us all away to Camelot. Aliens may not exist at all. Perhaps certain military personalities are using the alien idea to create a state of panic whenever necessary. But reports from my research indicate that mainly 3, possibly more, alien types are here with us, observing us, and, frankly, in some cases, interfering with our desires, our romantic encounters, our erotic dreams, and, more importantly, our mate selection process. Some abductees believe they were experiencing the visitation of interdimensional beings, aliens who seem to have mastered time travel. If that is true, any number of beings could be here from any number of future chronologies. Another group, calling themselves contactees, feel that they are the chosen ones and believe the aliens are here to raise our awareness of spiritual evolution. We may be evolving spiritually, but thousands of earthlings have had the same revelation without alien help. Other groups seem to champion the aliens who have mastered physical space travel. Still other groups focus on the aliens who are masquerading as angels of love and light. Few groups, at least, none that I have been in touch with, is of the opinion that the aliens are really no smarter than us. But I am starting to come to that very conclusion. One thing is certain. We should never assume any alien strategy is entirely selfless. That said, I think we can defend ourselves. I am sure they are not all powerful. I must repeat, I am not a clinical psychologist, but if you will sit in on one of my abductee support sessions, you will start to wonder why the aliens are so heavy-handed. By studying abductee relationship issues, we start to see the weak underbelly of the plan. Like a redwood splinter or sand in an oyster, the alien's very presence in our midst is a form of irritation, regardless of their technology or mode of travel. Acting under the inspiration of a famed scientist, Jacques Vallée, a man with impeccable academic credentials, several visionary researchers began gaining the trust of closet abductees who were too embarrassed or frightened to come out in the open. After several years of plumbing through hundreds of self-published and even typewritten books, as well as private notebooks, tapes, and videos, I found that the bonding dramas and obsessions orchestrated by the aliens represent a continuing pattern, which revealed itself soon after alien contact began. I say began here because most of these abductees were kidnapped several times. In my view, the phenomenon of alien-induced bonding is far more complex than simple human-to-human bonding. These alien-orchestrated exercises were only a precursor to what would later become dramatic love obsessions between 2 or more targeted partners, the descriptions and theoretical purposes of which form the basis for this book. I realized I was sitting on a small but growing mass of case histories and other raw material. Trends were emerging. Simple statistical tests showed significant correlations. What was once anecdotal and unscientific information was sputtering to become empirical hard data. A strange uneasiness came over me. Several times I stopped writing altogether, shelved the present work, and pledged never to finish it. Even when I stopped writing, I was distracted by television reports of fringe wackies like Bo and Peep and the Heaven's Gate cult. You remember, the people who wanted to transpose themselves to a space vehicle traveling in the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet? But before we dismiss them out of hand, I should point out that several people interviewed Bo and Peep long before they decided to kill themselves and found they were powerful people. News reports seen around the world revealed them to have amazing mind control powers. Still, most of their behavior appeared obsessive and anxiety-ridden, until after they accepted themselves as soul travelers, which became a mask of sanity, allowing them to ritualize their suicidal fate. But there is another side to the story. Heaven's Gate was a collection process. Bo and Peep went around the country seeking lost souls. Many of these people felt true love and acceptance, some for the first time. Naturally, they capitulated to the group in order to maintain their ecstasy. Here we see the alien orchestrated love strategy operating in a group setting. For the past decade, I have been dealing directly with the less charismatic and more damaged victims, the folks no one sees or hears about, especially the ones who the UFO community rejected. Why were they rejected? I think their stories fell on deaf ears because their experiences and reports were not in keeping with the conventional wisdom, namely that the aliens are benevolent harbingers of higher consciousness, or the assumption that alien abductions are limited to medical exams, implants, and hybrid breeding programs. No, the people I see every day are the abductees whose stories were judged to be quote unquote too negative or just plain bizarre. As stated previously, people have approached me in public to petition for help with someone in their family. These are not famous people. The least sensational abductee is, in my opinion, a very important link, deserving of kind treatment. Many people who join cults are clinically neurotic, to use a mild phrase, but for the most part, they are not abductees. True abduction, documented and verified, is one of the rarest and often traumatic experiences anyone can undergo. Bo and Peep claimed to be contactees, but many of Heaven's Gate members were tragic wannabes. Interviews with abductees are no simple matter. Your heart goes out to them and their families. They need support, but most people think of abductees as they do any undesirables. People who have been marked by aliens are shunned as if they were grotesquely disfigured lepers. Keeping a study like the present book, honest and objective in the face of these realities, has become the most difficult task of my writing career. Mainly because the fear and loathing rained upon abductees and the UFO groups is easily extended to writers. Bogus stories are another problem. Some people are really good liars, and clearly I was fooled several times, but I have good research associates and other professional friends. It didn't take me long to realize that I needed to sort out the wheat from the chaff. In doing so, I found numerous verifiable case histories and anecdotal reports that set the stage for future research. A few of the more typical cases form the bulk of this book. To enable this research, I coined the term love bite to describe alien interference in human erotic and romantic relationships. I call it the love bite because it hurts. The aliens' first encounter with their victims often entails actual invasive techniques Scoop marks appear, injections leave tracks, sperm samples, body fluid, and fertile ova are extracted. I call this process the primary love bite because the experience is much like the bite of a venomous animal, such as a snake or spider. The medieval Italian trance dance called the tarantella was attributable to the bite of a venomous spider, and for the unrequited love of her chosen mate, Cleopatra, already married to her brother, caused herself to be bitten by a poisonous adder. The real love bite occurs later in life when the abductee is bonded to another partner for the express purpose of creating a strong romantic attraction. But the sad part of it is these relationships are either short-lived and almost impossible to consummate, or one partner is left painfully unrequited. Other love bite relationships appear to be set up for the reproduction of specific children. A genetic bloodline study? More often than not, love bite relationships are dysfunctional, creating emotional chaos for one or the other partner. Following up on the love bite idea does seem to hold great promise. Rarely has alien interference in the love bonds and erotic dreams of abductees been discussed in detail. In Witnessed, the book, Bud Hopkins touches on the human-to-human bonding exercises orchestrated by the aliens, but this is not the focus of his book, and he does not suggest answers. In The Threat, David Jacobs suggests various modes of alien control and the hybrid breeding program. He sparsely speculates on what else the aliens might be planning or inspires us with any useful recourse. It is apparent from my interviews that the aliens spend a great deal of time tracing bloodlines and researching the human genome. I suspect they are farming, like we would raise a hybrid horse or dog. But the sadness and grief they generate points to the farming of a certain type of human energy. That energy which results from love obsession, broken hearts, and unfulfilled relationships. No one has focused solely on the modus operandi of alien manipulated relationships. What the heck is going on here? I asked myself. Why is not anyone studying the victims as if they are telling the truth? And why are not other researchers in the UFO field paying attention to the most important aspect of human lives, our love relationships? Has professional peer pressure and outright mind control prevented us from feeling safe enough to just tell the truth? In either case, the alien, or whoever is acting behind its image, is serious and not as mirthful as the hippies and New Age channelers have led us to believe. It sometimes bothers me to think I am alone in using non-hypnotic methods and crisis counseling techniques to help these emotionally exploited people, but I am committed to deeper exploration of what I see as the real agenda behind the alien presence. Their manipulated obsessions form a frightening social pattern, unstoppable by anything as low-tech as a burglar alarm. Once I began poring over the material and comparing it to my own, I discovered a tragic link, a link that led me to form the love bite hypothesis. So many people have been abducted. So many have been torn from their families by divorce and other hardships directly attributable to the post-abduction trauma that I wondered how anyone could think of aliens as compassionate. How could any enlightened entity destroy family groups and force a life of misery on any child? We've been asking that too. I have a house in the desert and go there to look at the stars away from the night glow of the city. One night I remembered pictures taken from the Hubble telescope. The specific picture was a convoluted organic debris heap, billions of light years across, which is a huge cloud-like galaxy that astronomers call the star nursery. But the beautiful imagery was soon sullied by the paradox before me. How could the extraterrestrials understand the inner workings of something as vast as the star nursery and yet not have mercy? In some far-off star center or time layer, the aliens must have made a kind of moral judgment on us and characterized us as useful, but an unstable race. Perhaps they wanted to study our world, but why make the children suffer? This led me to realize that few emotional issues appear as articles in UFO magazines. Most ufologists are hell-bent for the hard edge, nuts and bolts explanations. Issues such as relationship manipulations, love obsessions, and other trauma-based behavioral problems are simply not credible enough. Yet in my survey, I found substance abuse in many cases. In others, I found people suffering as if they had just come back from Vietnam or Kosovo. It was as if these people were at war with themselves and the aliens, as if they were engaged in a kind of spiritual warfare. Murder is suspected, but not proven. Suicidal fixations, on the other hand, are well documented amongst abductees. I took account of the case histories and tried to break them down into categories. I asked which ones dealt with rape and incest, heavy familial occult involvement, or alcohol and drugs, and so forth. Some patterns emerged. I could see that obsession and tendencies toward addictions were common to people with unresolved abduction issues. Kidnapping victims, if they survive, always report separation anxiety. But what role does obsessiveness play? That's when I knew I had to publish my findings. The psychic and real scars found on abductees have been sugar-coated in the UFO literature for far too long. As stated in the acknowledgments of this book, I owe a great deal of gratitude to the late Dr. Carla Turner, professor of literature at North Texas University. In spite of her training as a scholar and teacher, she was chided when she told the world of her abductee status. During her short tenure in the UFO field, Dr. Turner published 3 revealing books on the alien abduction phenomenon: Into the Fringe, Masquerade of Angels, and her master work, Taken. Highly recommend all of those books. They're amazing. In Masquerade of Angels, Turner tells the shocking story of Ted Rice, when details of deception, reptilian aliens, sexual assault, human cloning, and alien interference into the everyday lives of abductees. The interference, which lasts long after the abduction, is almost like an animal tagging program. Again, in Taken, Turner gives us an inside look at the alien-human abduction agenda, describing the joint alien and human military involvement, alien implants, abduction memories of cloning, and virtual reality scenarios installed by aliens into the abductees' minds. Much of this came out in various ways on the fabulously successful television show, The X-Files. But The X-Files and other popular media tend to distort the real process of what the individuals go through. Turner made us see that the abduction and subsequent interference is tantamount to torture, and for all intents and purposes, it can only be defined as evil. Almost as if the aliens were carrying out a banding or tagging program to observe animal migration patterns. I run the risk of sounding repetitive, but my research shows that the tagging experience often takes the form of an actual injection or inserted tracer or implant, which I think of as a ritualistic bite, much like an insect or snake bite, with adjuvant behavioral conditioning, which leads to changes to the victim's normal relationships. This bite may also cause radical changes in metabolism, life force, mental status, and brain waves. Thus the term love bite. But the real love bite usually comes later, after several abductions. I noticed, time and time again, that an abductee, once bitten, moves on to a life of virtual manipulation unless they receive help. This help can only be achieved by breaking the denial chain through knowledge, prayer, and meditation on positive behaviors. Almost every abductee caught up in a love bite scenario loses interest in their spouse and often grows estranged from their families, even their children, during the duration of the love bite, in order to obey an implanted obsession for an alien chosen target partner. That is the end of chapter 1. I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 6 to read you a case study so that you can understand more about how this works. Chapter 6, Charles and Sarah. The following case demonstrates a love bite with a targeted individual set up and manipulated by the alien abductors. This is a one-sided obsession on the part of the male abductee. Charles, a lifelong abductee, meets Sarah at a New Age conference and later meets her again at a small UFO lecture. He senses a strong emotional and sexual attraction to Sarah, even though Sarah is married. Sarah seems very familiar to Charles, who claims to have had intimate dreams of her traceable to his teens. Moreover, Charles is convinced he has had mutually shared alien abduction experience with Sarah, in which they had bonded sexually. Charles distinctly remembers a particular body mark, a scar on Sarah's inner thigh, that he could only know if he saw Sarah nude and at a close range, which he claims to have seen while aboard an alien ship. Charles becomes infatuated with Sarah and calls her every day, sometimes several times a day. He tells Sarah of some of his alien abduction memories, but Sarah is overwhelmed and grows frightened. 10 days later, Charles tells Sarah that the aliens matched them at an early age because they had similar energetic frequencies. He also mentions that she has a scar on a certain part of her body. Sarah brushes the comment off as a weird coincidence and tries to forget about it, but reports a growing familiarity and approach avoidance conflict toward and against Charles. Weeks go by. Charles can't get Sarah out of his mind. While at home watching television, he sees Sarah's face on a beautiful model on horseback, bringing tears to his eyes. He is overwhelmed with emotion and love for Sarah. Charles continues having flashbacks of having been with Sarah in dreams. He sees her riding bareback through some dark woods, but she is not in danger. The vividness of these daydreams and visions increase to such a degree that he begins to understand them as artifacts of the bonding program, initiated by aliens years ago. Charles calls Sarah to tell her about his insight and tries to reduce her own anxieties about their free-falling and ambiguous relationship. Only then did Sarah tell Charles she owned a Connemara show horse and was deeply involved in eventing, dressage, and other equestrian activities. Still, Sarah remained glib. Oh well, Sarah thought, it must be another coincidence. Charles, sensing rejection, grew anxious again. He saw the scar revelation and the equestrian vision as elements in a vast dharmic destiny, a path he should follow in life. Sadly, Charles could not bring himself to see the dangers involved in obsessive behavior. He was now fully in love with a woman he believed to be his future wife. He believes that he and Sarah will be together in the future and have a special destiny, perhaps to bear a child together. Charles also secretly believes that Sarah's youngest child that she has with her husband may really be his. Sarah did not reciprocate feelings for Charles and remained aloof, although she admittedly did not want to provoke him into irrational behavior. Finally, Charles saw the big picture and was crushed with unrequited love, a clearly defined earmark of the love bite phenomenon. But he did not give up hope. Charles said he was not trying to develop a sexual relationship with Sarah and claims he has been celibate for years. He felt the aliens prevented him from having sexual relationships other than the ones they chose for him. Sarah's rejection made no sense to him. He was certain their love would be consummated in a romantic and erotic manner. During winter, several months after Sarah's offer of simple friendship, Charles claims to have been abducted again and recalls being fully conscious during this encounter. He claims the aliens instructed him to have sexual relationships or sexual relations with his choice of a number of female subjects who were also on board the craft, but in a trance-like state. The aliens give Charles positive ego stroking and send him home without trauma. Charles claims he recalls having sexual relations with one of the women offered to him during that encounter on the ship. Charles claims that the aliens gave him secret information and hinted that they might have a special mission for him in the future. The next spring, Charles called Sarah again, this time to apologize. But the more they talked, the more she realized he was still obsessed. This frightened her again, and she made great efforts to cut off contact with him for good. She moved out of town, got a job transfer, and changed her appearance. Charles had difficulty taking the hint and was grief-stricken. The two never saw one another again. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 15, Suzanne. The following case demonstrates how the aliens work through sleeper operatives and trained infiltrators to observe UFO groups. The sleepers feel they are doing mankind a service, while in reality they are being used to spread misery, chaos, and misinformation. Suzanne. Suzanne is a lifelong abductee having contact with various greys and reptilians. She is a devotee to alien encounter research and runs a support group for UFO experiencers. Suzanne spends a tremendous amount of energy organizing the group and hosts occasional lectures with special guest speakers in the UFO community. She is spiritually oriented and wants to take a positive approach to the alien presence and their activities, yet she is traumatized by her own alien encounters. She has had a number of reptilian sexual assaults and psychic rapes and feels that her reptilian handler is possessive of her. At times, the sexual encounters with the 7-foot-tall reptilian male are shrouded by pleasant screen memories, and sometimes she thinks these attacks may be coming from her own past life experiences, as vivid dreams. In several therapy sessions, she had discovered that cover memories were implanted in her mind to hide the reptilian rape. As Suzanne networked and learned more about other abductees, she became more skeptical of the overly spiritualized positive view of the aliens. Suzanne underwent hypnotic regressions, rebirthing, and various modes of counseling to bring light to her fragmented abduction memories, some of which were very traumatic. Eventually, she started to share her discoveries with members of the support group. Marie, a new, very friendly contactee, considered herself psychically gifted, joined the group, and began to bond with Suzanne. She often performed psychic readings for New Age groups, in person and over the phone. Marie and Suzanne hit it off, and coincidentally, Marie was looking for a new place to live. Suzanne just happened to need a roommate, so Marie moved in. At first, Marie appears positive and supportive. She offers free psychic readings to some support group members over the phone. As time goes on, a rift begins to appear. Marie, in typical New Age fashion, believes the space beings are helpful spirit guides, possibly even gods or angels, who are here for our spiritual development and evolution. Suzanne, having seen far too much misery caused by alien abductions, is convinced they are, for the most part, malevolent and dedicated to the dominance of the human spirit. Marie channels a being called Sananda or Ashtar, and started charging people for readings and workshops. Suzanne saw this as a conciliatory gesture, but all the while the channeling was going on, Marie was raiding Suzanne's client list for psychic readings over the phone. Suzanne became furious with Marie when she discovered the breach of ethics. But more importantly, Marie managed to convince about half of the list that Suzanne's attitude toward the aliens was wrong, and that the aliens bring a message of peace and goodwill. Suzanne realized that Marie has a Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde personality, and she realizes Marie may be dissociative. In other words, she may be going through what psychologists call fugue state amnesia, which usually leads to a diagnosis of multiple personality disorder, or what is known today as dissociative identity disorder. It is important to realize that this is not a psychotic state. The person with multiple personality is not crazy, and they are not schizophrenic. Neither of the personalities is really split from the reality, but in most cases, the personalities do not know about each other. In other words, the personalities dissociate from one another. Although once very rare, this disorder is now well documented and is categorized in medical terms as dissociative personality disorder, or DID, usually caused by early severe trauma, or in this case, could be trauma-based mind control techniques used by Project Monarch and MK Ultra. In the long run, Suzanne saw that Marie's metaphysical platitudes masked a frightened, anxious, and angry woman who could not deal with her own alien encounters. Marie really didn't know what happened in most of her alien contacts, but believed it must be good for her. Why, if the abductions were so good for her, does she maintain a persistent undertone of negative energy? Why would she steal my confidential list? Suzanne wondered. Other people in the support group made similar comments and noticed that Marie was draining their energy insidiously, like a psychic vampire. Stretched to the limit, Suzanne asked Marie to move out. One weekend, when Suzanne was away speaking to abductees, Marie finally moved out, but not after creating chaos and infighting in Suzanne's local support group. While Suzanne was away, she met another reptilian contactee, Tina, who claims to be psychic. Tina, like Marie, feels the reptilians are really good and have done numerous positive things for her. Tina spoke positively about her male reptilian handler, who she claimed never assaulted her, despite waking up with claw marks, and gave her special assignments. She tells Suzanne that you can have anything you want as long as you do the assignments they give you. Tina has not ever had any extensive therapy or hypnotic regressions to uncover her alien encounters. Suzanne is appalled at this growing naivete in this abductee community and set a resolve to delve further into the alien agenda. When Suzanne returned home, she discovered that Marie has moved elsewhere, leaving a mess behind for Suzanne to clean up. Marie also converted the utility bills to her own name and shut down all of the utilities when she moved out, leaving Suzanne without electricity or water. Shortly thereafter, Suzanne discovered that the UFO support group has effectively split apart and that Marie had been unconsciously working as a sleeper operative for months to undermine Suzanne's efforts. Suzanne contacted James and I, and we presented our research findings to a gathering of her remaining group. During our visit there, Suzanne's new roommate, Jody, an informed and intelligent abductee, claimed to have been contacted by the NSA, by an NSA operative who tried to get her to take part in a mind control project. Jody avoided the agent, but he was persistent, eventually offering a lucrative, easy job. In spite of this temptation, Jody ignored him and he finally gave up. We were not sure whether to believe Jody or not, but considering Jody's background in the Air Force, at one time working on a secret project, we gave her the benefit of the doubt. Was she being recruited so that Jody and Suzanne would be more easily monitored? The next morning, Jody and Suzanne looked outside towards the parking lot, only to see an unidentified man in white coveralls searching Jody's car. The man became aware that he had been spotted and peeled out in a white van. To avoid future problems and violations of their privacy, Suzanne and Jody moved to another town and took steps to disguise their identity. Suzanne is deeply disappointed at the loss of her support group and is rebuilding her network of contactees. So that's all I'm going to read for now. I hope this gives you somewhat of an idea of how the alien love bite works. And maybe you can even see how it may have operated in your own life. I will also be doing a reading of the In the Dark Side of Cupid, um, which more so has to do with narcissistic personalities and the entities that inhabit them and how those relationships play out. So it kind of goes hand in hand, but it's a more expansive study on the relationships themselves. Let me know in the comments if you guys have ever noticed any weird things in your relationships, any patterns that might come up. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Thanks so much.